back to Maintenance Minute. I'm Jim Vbrock. In this episode, we're going to make these really neat antique reproduction wine crates. Let's get started. Okay, welcome back to the wood shop, everybody. You can tell I've been having some fun. Back when my wife and I had our flea market, I sold hundreds of these antique reproduction crates. And I've made literally hundreds of these things over the years. And my former client has called me up and asked me if I could make another batch. So that's what I've been doing, is making crates. So my wood shop is absolutely full of crates right at the moment, waiting for me to ship them out. Now let me tell you a little bit about the crate that we're going to build today. This is an actual antique reproduction. When we had the flea market, I found this wooden crate that I really liked. It was gray and weathered and beat up and everything, and I just thought it had some neat lines and some neat features to it. So what I did is I took patterns off of it. If you watch any of my videos, you know I make templates and you know I make patterns. So it was a handcrafted crate, and so it has all of the characteristics of it being handmade well over 100 years ago. And we're going to reproduce that for you today. This is a very easy project, but there's a lot of steps involved. So we're going to have some fun. The first thing we want to do is go to our big box retailer and get a 2x4. Now, I use a different kind of 2x4. Your box retailer may not have it. This is actually a 2x3, or sometimes they're called mobile home studs. So they're not the full 1.5 by 3.5 inches that a typical stud is. These are 1.5 inches by about 2 3/4, and so they work out really good, and they're not quite as harshly sanded on the sides as the big 2x4 is. So we need one of those, and then we need enough of a 1x6, which is actually 5.5 inches, to make the two sides. So I've got a scrap piece of 1x here that we're going to use. We're going to rip them down on the table saw first, and then we're going to work on making the slats. So let's go over to the table saw first. Okay, what we need is a board that is 5.5 inches long. Now our crates are basically 16 inches square. I'll go over that again here in just a minute, how to maximize the length of your lumber, because you don't want any scrap if you can handle it. And because of that, I'm going to use a piece of scrap to make my sides. You can go to your big box retailer and buy a 1x6. It will measure 5.5 inches by 3/4 of an inch actually, and that'll work just fine. But I like to use reclaimed material whenever I can. I actually bought this material at an auction a long time ago, and I've had it in a barn. So it's a little discolored, but we're going to sand it up or just use it the way it is for a little character. So what I want to do is set my table saw to 5.5 inches, and the principles for that are the same in all of my videos. The teeth on your saw are what they call curved, meaning one tooth points towards the fence and one tooth points away, and they're alternating around the blade. You always want to measure from the tooth that is pointing towards the fence. So I'm going to measure here at 5.5 inches. I'm going to do it both front and back side of the blade, and then I want to set the depth of my cut to where my teeth are just barely coming up. The full tooth is coming up out of the wood. You don't want that blade sticking up too much higher than that, because it makes it easier to cut a finger or something. And we want you to work safe as often as possible. So I'm going to rip this board down to the 5.5 inches, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, I'm over at my compound miter saw, and what I want to do is just make sure that my ends are square. It's pretty safe to assume that your ends are square from the factory, but in this case this one's not, or this board's been cut at some point. So I just want to tail the end of my board to make sure that it's square. Now if you're using a factory piece, be sure and check the ends of this for staples, because you don't want to accidentally run a staple through your blade. So I'm just going to square this up. Okay, now I know I have a square end, and I want to bring this measurement. Now I mentioned a minute ago that our crates were basically 16 inches square. If I cut on the left hand side of my line, in this case on 16 inches, when I get down to the end of an 8-foot board, my last piece is going to be short. So I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is take my 16-inch point, which is right here, and I'm going to draw my line there just like you always would, but in this case I'm going to cut on the right hand side of that line. So that's actually going to make this piece, instead of being a full 16 inches, it's going to be 15 inches and 7/8. So it's going to be just underneath the full 16-inch mark, but it's going to allow me the maximum use of my material. So I'm going to line this up and cut it on the right hand side of the line. And then as I go down through there, if I have a full 8-inch or a full 8-foot board, I'll have all of my pieces. If I'm doing multiples, I'll have all of my pieces that end up being the same length, and none of them will be short. So in this case, I need 2 ends, and so I'm going to do this twice. So if you're mass producing these, that way you won't have any scrap or any small pieces. Okay, so here are my 2 ends, and I'm going to take them over to my template now and make the handle. Okay, for this video purpose, I'm assuming you're making a single crate. I'm going to show you some tips along the way how you can make multiples in case you want to sell these in your area. I've made a template here from way back when and this is made off of the original antique crate that I made. So I can duplicate this over and over and over and over again because I made this template. I'm also going to show you a template a little bit later on how to cut these holes where you can cut lots and lots and lots of them. So, but assuming that we're just building one today, I'm going to take my pattern and I'm going to just lay it down here on the boards that we just cut, and make sure that you get it on there square. Just take a pencil and trace out your, now you could do this on a piece of paper if you wanted to. I might even add a link or something to my Facebook page where you could print one of these if you want to. I'll try and remember to do that. So anyway, so there, I'm going to have 2 that are going to have the handle in the exact same spot. And I think that's important. So the next thing I'm going to do is go get ready to cut this out. Okay, to cut this out, I need to be able to get a saw blade in there. So what I'm going to do is drill a hole through here so that I can get my jigsaw in here and clean that out. So I like to use a bit that is the same size as this rounded edge here. You use whatever you want to do. The jigsaw will be able to cut this out. I'm also going to show you here in a minute how you can cut multiples of these very quickly. But I'm assuming that in your home shop you don't have some of those fancy tools. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the tools that I think you might have in your home shop. So this is just a drill press. I've got me a 1-inch drill bit in here, and I'm just going to drill this out for you. Okay, the next thing I'm going to want to do is cut out my handles. Now, you could have gotten creative there and made, you know, fancy handles there if you wanted to. This is your project. You do what you want to. Again, I'm just doing a reproduction to an antique we saw. So I'm just taking my regular old jigsaw. I've got my piece clamped to my table, but I've got it hanging over so I don't actually cut into my table. And I'm just going to follow the line that we drew on there earlier from our template. Okay, and there you have it. You're going to do that, of course, on both pieces. Okay, now, when you grab a hold of this, this is a little hard on the knuckles. So I want to soften the inside of this handle. It also gives it the appearance that the crate has been used a lot over the years. So for comfort and for just a little historical accuracy, we're going to round this off a little bit. So what I've done, this is my tabletop router, and I've put a round over bit in there, and this is bearing guided, so it's not going to cut back into my workpiece. It's just simply going to round that off and soften it up a little bit. You can use a handheld router for this, same bit and everything. Just clamp it down like we did when we had the jigsaw a second ago. So let me cut this out for you. Now, if you had some uneven parts in there, you could have sanded that out. ahead of time and made that nice and smooth before you rounded that in there. But we like the character of each individual piece, so we just leave them like that. You do it how you want to because this is your piece. Even if you made a special handle here, your router bit would follow that along and make that nice and smooth and soft. All right, so we now have our end pieces done. Let's go cut our slats. Okay, now let's cut our slats. This is what I call a mobile home stud. It's 1.5 inches by about 2.5 when it comes from the big box retailer. Now, you may not have these at your big box retailer. Just use a 2x4 instead. What we want to do though is get that rounded edge off of this first, and then we're going to turn it over, and we'll end up with about 2.25 when we're done. So what I've done is I've set my table saw at just under the 2.5 inches that we have. So it'd be like 2 3/8 perhaps. I just want to take that edge off. So I'm going to fire this up, run it down through there, and we'll take that edge off of there. Now that I have one edge square, I want to turn the board over and do the other side. So I want to set my saw down now at 2.25 inches, which I've got it set there now, and I'm going to run this through, and then I'll have both sides nice and square. Okay, now I have square edges on all 4 sides of my board. If I hadn't cut those rounded edges off, some of my slats would have rounded edges and some of my slats would have square. And I want all of my slats to look the same. That's why we did that. Now you have a decision to make here depending on the type of saw that you have. These small saws really aren't set up or designed per se to do what we call resawing. And that is the cutting through the board on its long axis. They're really pretty good at doing it this way, but they're not really designed, the motors aren't big enough to do the resawing, so to make the slats this way. So you may decide, if you're not super experienced with your table saw, that you want to just go ahead and cut 1.5 inch slats, which would be cutting the board laying flat this way, okay? But I'm going to resaw them and show you a new skill, and which means we're going to cut them on the upright vertical axis here. So what I've done is I set my saw at 3/8 of an inch. The reason why I did that is because my board is 1.5 inches. And if I cut at 1/2 inch for each slat, then one of my slats is going to be thinner than the others. So I want to cut on the right hand side of the blade, same thing we did earlier, but now it's on the table saw, so that I can have, 3 equal size slats out of one of these boards. So that's what that's going to look like when we're done. And I've got to raise my blade way up. Now again, this saw is just not designed to do this, and it is dangerous. So if you're not comfortable with doing this, then just skip this part and go back to making them at the 1.5 inches this way. So I'm going to cut this now, and we'll have some slats. Okay, I cut my first slat out of that. And because this is a home grade saw, I'm not going to torture this saw and make it do another one right off the bat. I'm going to let this saw cool down a little bit, then I'm going to run another one through there, and then I'll trim up my third one. And I'll do this for as many times as I need to do this. On my commercial grade saw, I can run these through just as fast as it can go through because the motor is designed to do that. These home grade saws just aren't designed to that, and I want to protect this little saw. It's a great little saw. I have no problems with it at all, but it's just too much work for it. So I'm going to let it cool down for 5 or 10 minutes, then cut my next slat. Okay, now that I have a batch of slats cut up, if you've got the ability to run these through some kind of a drum sander or some kind of a other sander, now would be the time to do it while they're long like this. It'd be much easier to do. Otherwise, we're going to sand these later after we cut them off. Okay, I brought my slats over to my compound miter saw, and this is where we're going to cut them all to the same length. Now, my saw, I'm lucky enough that I've got this little tab, and I can slide this out and lift this little tab up to the desired length, and then all I have to do is put my boards up against that tab, and they'll all be straight up and down on this end. If you don't have that ability, just make sure that they're all straight up and down. Use a square if you have to make sure that they're straight up and down. No problem there. And then get your length correct. Now again, remember, this board was exactly 8 foot. So if we do our 16 inches mark, and cut on the wrong side of the line, then we're going to have short ones when we get to the end. So here's my 16-inch mark, and if I cut on the right hand side of the line in this case, then this is going to be 15 7/8 inches. If I cut on the left side of this line over here, then when I get to the end, I'm going to have short pieces and wasted some of my board, and I don't want to do that. So I've got this set to where it should be at 15 7/8 inches when they're cut. I've got them stacked, and you can do this. This is called cutting multiples. You can do this because it's the same as cutting a full thick piece like this if you had one on there. So it's not unsafe, but you don't want to go higher than your fence in the back, because then it can be. Then the top one can slide, and that creates an unsafe deal. So as long as you've got backing against your fence, you can cut as many of these at a time as you have fence to hold them up. So in this case, I grabbed an extra slat. I'm going to do 4 at a time on here. And again, I've got it preset. It's going to be at 15 7/8 when we're done. And I'm going to go down through here and do this whole board, and all of these are going to end up being the same, even the ones on the end. Okay, so now I'm down to my last slats. And if we did this right, I'll be able to put this right up against the deal. And then I like to just tail them to make sure that they're right. And they are. So all of those slats are going to be exactly the same length. So now we're ready to go over to the assembly table. Okay, I'm over at my assembly table. We're getting close to the end of this project, but I don't like these marks on my boards, and I don't like these ink on my boards. So I'm going to take some time and clean it up with my orbital sander. Again, if you have a different way of doing this, a more efficient way of doing this, by all means do it. Because you're going to have some little burrs on here you're going to want to clean up. And it's going to take a while to clean up these slats individually. But I'm going to do that. And remember, you just need 10 for your project, and I have way more than 10 here. So I'm going to get 10 ready, and then we'll start to assemble this. So I finished sanding it as good as I'm going to do it. When I produce these in large quantities, I run them through my drum sander. Run them through a couple of times at 80 grit. They come out pretty nice. I want to leave a little bit of detail to them because we do want them to look like they're old. You can actually sand details into these. And before we're done, I'm going to show you a trick on painting them or staining them to make them look old. But as far as assembly is concerned, you'll notice that our handles are slightly off center. So you want to put your thin part to the top. So I'm going to put these upside down like that on my table, and I'm going to grab one of my slats, and I will start at this end up here. Now I've got me a stapler here. I'm going to put 7/8 inch staples in it. And so what I'll do is I'll start up here at the top, and I'll make it flush, and I'll put 2 staples in. Then I'm going to come over here to the other side, move that over, and do the same thing. I'm going to make it flush on those 2 axes, 2 planes, and put staples in. Then I'm going to come down here to the bottom and do the same thing. I'm going to just put those staples in, make sure it's flush on both of the sides. And then I'm going to have to pull this together, and then sometimes you got to put a little pressure on it, but you want it nice and flush. Now I stop at this point, take my square, and put it on here and make sure that it's square. Most of the time it is, but occasionally you got to tweak it just a little bit to make sure that it's square. So it's good. Now, the rest of this presents a dilemma. I have taken and done my math and found out this is slightly under 1/2 inch, so I made a spacer for this, and I suggest you do the same thing. Do the math, but if you've been following my math, then this will work for you. So I put that in, then I take a slat, put it in under, right, pinch it up tight, and staple it. But that's our project for today, guys. Really cool project. I hope you make it. I hope you've had fun. If you like these kinds of videos, please subscribe to my channel. If you've got friends that like these kinds of videos, invite them over to my channel and have them subscribe as well. Be sure to hit the thumbs up, like button. You can visit my Facebook page, which is Maintenance Minute with Jim Vibrock. And the link to it will be in the description of this video. You can visit my wife's Facebook page. She has Whistle Stop Custom Creations. She is really the mastermind behind these arts and crafts projects. I just build them for her. And she has great ideas there for you as well. I love your comments and I love your pictures. So if you're on our Facebook pages, please be sure and comment and show us what you've done, or give us suggestions for additional videos. There is some bonus footage in here for those of you who may try to build these to sell. These were very good sellers for me. If you have any questions or anything, please let me know. But most importantly, thank you for watching.